Welcome to Wealth Unfiltered, your go-to source for industry insights and wealth creation. Stay ahead of the curve with a thorough breakdown of market trends, financial developments, and the impact of current events on your wealth building strategy. We deliver the latest updates and essential insights into the financial world through expert interviews and detailed analysis. Hey everybody, welcome back to Wealth Unfiltered. I'm Samantha Parinello and I am your host, and I'm here with my resident guest, expert Chris Panelo. Hi.
Hi, happy to be here.
Yay. Okay, great. So we're super excited. This episode we have in store for you is one that is questions that Chris gets asked multiple times a week. So we are doing the art of capital raising and building a top tier IR team. So like I said, what really inspired us was that Christopher goes through, hundreds of calls a week, talking to LPs, talking to our, partners. And we just were recently at NMHC, the conference that's the biggest multifamily conference held in Las Vegas. And one of the questions that Chris was asked frequently was all about who he was, his background. And then they realized, like, wow, you seem really valuable. And then they, I think, really were like, how do we get you? Was like the first question. And Chris is like, I'm not for sale. So then the next question naturally was, well, how do I get AU? So really, I think what we really wanted to start with today was I'm going to dive into a bunch of questions that will help people understand whether you're trying to just sell something and then market it, or build capital for investing long-term on your own, or if you're an actual private equity firm that's trying to do the same thing that Viking does in Chris's role. Our ultimate goal here is to try to add as much clarity and strategy for the things that Chris does, and hopefully this will be a really great episode for you all. So without further ado, I'm going to start asking you some good questions, okay?
Wonderful.
Awesome. So my very first question for you would be, how does somebody go about finding a leader for their IR department?
Yeah, I think there's lots of ways to find the right leader. There's search engines, there's things like LinkedIn that actually get the candidates. You're a marketing person, so you understand that you're going to need job leads and applicants. But I think before you do any of that, the really important part is looking at your company objectives and figuring out what you need. And then more importantly, who you need. And once you can figure out what they're going to be doing, where they're going to be spending time, what type of attributes they need, then you can start looking at the pool of applicants and trying to figure out who's going to be able to fit that need.
So when you talk about the need and the qualities or characteristics in which you would have, what would be some specifics that you think would make a great leader for the position?
So in my opinion, and these are things that I try to work on with my own, personal culture and the way I think authenticity is really important. I think being able to take really complex ideas and simplify them. Because at the end of the day, when you're investor relations, you're not selling widgets, right? You're selling investments to people. Usually, if they knew how to do these investments on their own, they would. Right. And they'd probably add sweat equity to hard work and knowledge and do active real estate. A lot of these people want to participate in real estate without having the decade of knowledge that it would take to be successful in a lot of these endeavors and go through some of the obstacles. So being an educator first and understanding that your investors are relying on you to help them understand how things work, that comes with, pretty heavy responsibility, because as you are helping them understand the nuances to real estate investing or any type of investing, you're also building trust. And you'll have opportunities to shorten the sales cycle or the steps to close, but every step you take away from the sales cycle and the education cycle to get to a quicker close, you risk the chance of losing trust. Because ultimately, what should be the end of that sales cycle is them fully understanding what they're investing in, them understanding the risk around the investment, and them making an educated decision to where they understand what could go wrong, what could go right, where the opportunity is, and that aligning with their risk appetite. And if you can get there and you can find someone that can help investors get there, you're going to find success.
So how would you go about finding that person? Would you look at maybe their DISC score? Would you have specific questions within the interview process that you would always use? Like what are some of the tools that what you think about?
Yeah. And as I dissect some of my experience, some of the things that I think helped me get there was I had a little bit more of an institutional background. So I saw the other side of this. I remember being in, investment committees and, dealing with a lot of people that probably had more knowledge than I had. And it was more of you're getting asked a ton of questions and you're just hoping that you have the right answers, that you're looking this at the right way. That the three guys that went to Wharton that are looking at your deal that are putting in mechanisms into the contracts to protect themselves and to put leverage on you, that you're able to have the same type of rigor in your underwriting and that everything is, going to work out for the best for both parties. So I think the biggest thing that I look for is experience. I think
Like time of experience or level or both?
I don't think it's necessarily time. I think it's level.
Okay.
And it's somebody that's actually done the work. So, you can learn about something till you're blue in the face and you might be able to talk about it really, really well. But unless you have actually done it, you've worked with institutions or family offices or RIAs, or you've met with 10,000 LPs over the history of your career, it takes reps to do everything.
Right.
So when you interview someone and you talk to them, you'll be able to flesh out if they've done it before or not, if you've done it before. So I think the biggest thing is if you're trying to hire somebody to do something that you've done before, then that makes it a ton easier because you know what to look for. Because
But I would argue that most people looking probably haven't done it before, right? If they're looking for somebody who's a leader to do this, it's because maybe they're good at the marketing piece, but they're not good at the sales piece. Or maybe they don't have either of those, but they're the founder or the CEO of the company. So let's say, for argument's sake, that this is somebody who has no experience. They don't know what they're looking for. And the objective is to find someone who this is really their wheelhouse. And they're like, I'm praying that I'm finding the right human being right here. So like, what would be some things that you would suggest? Maybe questions or something that because you're saying I would know. Yeah. So how do you know?
I would say first and foremost, rely on common sense.
Okay.
So come prepared to the interview, research, talk to other people. Like I can't tell you how many people that are in my network or Vikram or Ravi's network that are trying to do this. And they were smart enough to call me and say, what do you look for? What do you do? What are some of the skills that you have? And they're not asking me to recruit for them, or they're not hiring a recruiter yet or a consultant, but they understand that there's a knowledge gap and they need to solve for that knowledge gap before they start interviewing people.
So find a resource of somebody who you trust and know.
Yep.
Okay, very good.
And then, that takes time. And if you don't have time, hire a consultant or hire a recruiting firm. And you'll always need to spend the time to figure out what your business needs, because a consultant's not going to be able to do that for you. They might say that they'll be able to do that for you. And a recruiting agency might be like, oh yeah, well, we've hired tons of real estate professionals and we can find the perfect one for you. But in my experience, they're talking to thousands of applicants. A lot of times they're trying to poach people from other firms. Most people looking for a job are looking for a job for a reason. Every once in a while you find a diamond in the rough circumstances. But in my opinion, what you want to do is you want to find the skill set that you're looking for, make sure that you have that really defined. And really, when you're talking to these applicants, sit down and spend the time to talk to them. Don't 15, 20-minute interview, not going to cut it. Like you really need to have well thought out questions that prove that they've actually done the work. You're not going to just say, how long have you done this? And expect them to give you a straight answer. You'll say, give me a time when you worked with an LP who was nervous about an investment and tell me the 3 things that you used to help them understand what they were investing so it was less fearful for them.
Right. And maybe also give an example of a time where there was something, whether it was a held distribution or it was maybe they had to or it could be that they were speaking to somebody who wasn't accredited and they had to let them down easy or explain that process. Like simple questions, like if for an investment of like what Viking does is, do you understand what an accredited investor is? And like
Right.
having them actually explain it to you, because even people who are in sales, not everyone understands what that means. They don't know the nuances of it. So asking detailed questions that your investors would ask, I think from the investor like hat as well would be probably really beneficial, because if your investors are going to ask them these questions, then you should be able to ask them in an interview and get the answer you're looking for.
Right. And I mean, that really just scratches the surface, right? So that's one of the objectives, is you're trying to say, do you know what you're talking about? Do you understand what my company does? Are you able to talk about it? Have you talked about these types of things before? Then you kind of move on and you're like, okay, you're going to be a leader in my company. Do you have experience as a leader?
Right.
Have you ever set up a mentorship program? Have people learned from you and become something greater? Can you replicate your own skill set? Because anyone that's looking to hire an investment relations professional is probably getting to a point where they can't do all the work anymore and they're scaling. So if
Absolutely.
your goal is to scale your company, guess what? The next person that's working under you, that's taking this off your plate, like the way that you're going to see growth in them is when they can replicate that skill set and start growing someone under them. Can they take an intern and take a green college student and turn them into an associate and then a manager and then a director? These are all things you want to ask yourself, because what you're doing when you're hiring that first leader in your team is you're building the foundation of your company.
Right.
And when you're building the foundation of your company, you really can't afford to get that wrong a bunch. Having the right people in the right seats is very important. And that's the second thing I look for is, can this person lead? And then once you get through, do they understand the subject matter and can they lead? Then it becomes, how do they solve problems? Critical thinking. And that's the big thing, because no matter who you hire, presumably, unless you spend, if you're always going to be hiring top of the market people and you're like, okay, I'm going to hire the most expensive investment sales relations person I can find. If that's your strategy for every area of your company, your overhead's going to be too high and you're going to put a lot of risk on your company not failing unless you do a lot of what you're supposed to do. In my opinion, and what I like to do is I like to find a leader and I like to make sure that they know how to lead and mentor. And then I want them to take their knowledge and I want them to bring up younger, greener people and replicate that skill set at a much lower cost. Whether it's an unpaid intern, a paid intern, an associate, work them through the system, because if you can get bright minds, they're out there. People that want to learn, want mentorship, you teach them the right things to do. Not a lot of people know how to do real estate the right way, because in order to do real estate the right way, you have to do it for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. But the next generation of real estate professionals are at companies that understand how important mentorship is and how important the associate or the intern understands that mentorship is, in most cases, more valuable than the salary you're paying them.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually, you already answered one of my questions, which was when you're searching for a candidate, and I wouldn't say specifically just for the leader, but when you're building out your team, my question was going to be, are you looking for somebody with experience, like that's been doing something with tenure basically, or would you rather have the greener, younger mind that you can build and mold and have fresh talent? So I think you really answered that for the most part. Would you say it depends on the position?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it when you're looking for a leader, and that leader is going to be siloed. I think those three criteria are best. Once you start talking to that leader about developing a team, then it becomes a little bit more nuanced, and either you or the leader that's going to be developing their team need to have a strategy in place. I am a sports person. I love sports. So I always kind of delineate things to sports teams, teamwork. When you start developing a team, it's only natural that they're going to have to work together. They're going to have to collaborate. So that's when things like the DISC score, and we have our applicants take the Wonderlic, the DISC score, the interview process to get a job with Viking. You're talking to like 6 or 7 leaders in the company, and the interviews are like an hour and a half long, even for interns. So we're trying to figure these things out. And really, when you're engineering the team, you're trying to fit pieces together. Like, you don't want a basketball team with 5 centers.
Right.
That wouldn't make any sense. Who's going to move the ball up and down the court? Like, it wouldn't work. So it's the same thing, whether it's an investor relations team or a marketing team or a sales team. There's going to be people that have different skill sets. And I have people on my team, some that are really charismatic, great at sales. Maybe their organizational skills aren't the best.
Correct.
I have people that have a combination of both, and they can be in 2 different departments within my team that makes sense for them based off of their skill set. So that leader is going to have to be able to find people to fill in the gaps.
Well, and specifically, I think it's important to fill in their gaps, right?
Correct.
So like, it's really important when you're building a team to look at yourself and be humble and honest with yourself and say, where am I the strongest and where are my gaps? And finding someone, like, for instance, I always go back to this because I don't even think it necessarily has to be a gap so much as just when you look at you and I, for instance, you can take away it being even for work, but then we can apply it to work as well in our positions. As like a couple, we have things that you're great at and things that I'm great at. And without one of us, we wouldn't be able to accomplish the things we're looking for. And same thing goes like with having somebody who has like the drive and the motivation and all those pieces. And then you have the integrator, the person who's like in the operations side and doing all of those things. We have that in our household. We have that in our like our working relationship. And we also have it in all of our departments, and we have it at the head of our company, right? So I think it's super important to look at those things when you're hiring beneath you, because those people are supposed to be acting on your behalf. So they have to have the same like mindset. They need to have the like be bought in and say, I agree with like the things that you're trying to do. We have a great culture together. Like that's why I really do like the DISC score. I feel like it helps you figure out where people maybe balance you, or if, like, for me, I do not like numbers. It's not my thing. You're really great at numbers. But like, so people on my team need to be strong at numbers, because it's something, if I don't like it, then I'm not going to apply the time to it, no matter how much it's a necessity, right?
Yeah, no. And this reminds me of a tool. So recently Viking brought on a fractional COO, and he's been fantastic in a ton of ways. And one of the things that he brought to the leaders in each division was this kind of quadrant chart, kind of similar to the things we do in EOS. But it was at the top left quadrant. It was things that you're good at and things that you like. And then the next one, it was things that you're good at but you don't like to do. And then it was things that you're not good at and you don't like to do, and things that you're not good at but you like to do. And it was really powerful because I think it was different for every leader in the company.
I'm sure.
For me, I already just inherently think like that. If it's something I don't like to do, I'm probably not good at it, because the things that I'm good at, I really like to do. Right. So when we did ours, all of my things were kind of in the top left-hand corner the way they were supposed to be. But I imagine that there's other people that have less developed teams and have less experience running teams and building team culture that we're doing a lot of things that they don't like to do. And the answer to that question is, you probably don't like to do it because you're not very good at it.
Right.
Or there's a higher and best use of your time, and you really need to push that off, because like for me, that one thing that was over there was the sales calls. I'm passionate about talking to people. It's my favorite thing. So when I have to take over for one of my teammates and I jump on a call with an investor that's probably not going to invest, and I'm on the phone with them for 35 minutes and we're just kind of, shooting the breeze, like, it's my happy place. It's fun. I've made a new connection and friend. But I realized that like I couldn't take 1,000 phone calls a week and focus on the higher and best uses of my time. That's something I have to give away. But that's something that Viking's going to be doing over the next quarter or 2 quarters, is making sure that the people that are in leadership are doing the highest and best use of their time, but also the things that they're good at and that they like to do. And if it doesn't fall within one of those quadrants, we evaluate it, and it's a job, right? Sometimes you have to do things you don't like to do. But we're going to try our best to move the company forward and fill in the gaps with other team members that do like to do those things, and it does fit their personality and it does fit their skill set. And when we grow and when we see the potential and more revenue and more success to bring on new people, we will have identified the gaps that we need to fill, even if we can't fill them right away.
That's the biggest piece, is understanding the gaps for the entire business, for the company, as well as for yourself, to fill them while structuring your team. So speaking of structuring a team, so when we're talking about the IR department and sales, though they are the same but different, for yourself, you have started recently, as you've built out your team, kind of put things into two separate buckets for IR. So let's talk about how you're structuring your team and how somebody maybe from when you got here until what it is now, how you've developed it, and like what that looks like as you continue to scale.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say unequivocally, the most powerful thing that I figured out was that there is a clear distinction between investor relations or raising capital and marketing. When I was brought on to Viking, it was one and the same. And it only took a year for me to say, you know what? I have a lot of skills, but making pitch decks isn't one of them. Like digital design isn't one of them. And we hired marketing agencies that I had to run. Still, I wasn't the leader to run a marketing agency. So they used a bunch of, non-layman terms, and I would get confused. I didn't really understand what they were talking about. And the goal was that if you pay us or we use paid ads, we're going to find success. And we'd find success, but it never really seemed to fit. And at one point, I went to the CEO of the company and I said, I truly, with all my heart, believe that if we can give all of this marketing stuff to a marketing genius and I could focus on my zone of genius, that we're going to find immense success.
Correct.
And he bought in. And he was somebody that is really good at marketing, but the investment sales piece, even though he was above average, really good at it, he didn't have some of the institutional knowledge that I had. Right. And it was something that I was bringing to the company that was really valuable. And when we delineated those two things, then it became really powerful because I was always uncomfortable with the really marketing aspects of marketing. And I'm like, I don't want to sound like that. Even this podcast, I was like, I don't know. But once Ashley came on and she really understood the numbers behind everything, she knew how to build a marketing team, just like I know how to build an IR team. She knew how to hold them accountable. She knew what levers to push in order to get those leads in, and then to help me decide how quality the leads were, and then fine tune that to get even better quality leads. So we almost operate as a dual division because our success relies on the other person's work, effort, and success.
Right.
And that was the most powerful thing, I think, for me since I've been with Viking, because we went from 2x growth to where now that we're a team, we've taken our LP database of people that are actively working with us from 350 to over 1,000 LPs.
Right. Having aces in places, I think is really important. So from the beginning where you were doing both the marketing and the IR, then within a year you split and we hired Ashley, and then eventually we've grown our marketing team. After that, now you had the opportunity to really focus on investor relations and build out your team even more. So let's talk about how you built out that team and then how you've now even grown that to almost 2 other departments.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's also been really powerful. And I think the main piece that I noticed was that we aren't capital markets, we're investor relations. So 50% of your job is going out there and capitalizing the projects that you're going to be buying. Investors are looking for things to invest with, and you need to have a sales component of your division. The other component is, we call it investor services. And this is nurturing and maintaining your investor base. And when I realized that I couldn't just have a roster of salespeople, because then what you end up having is more of a systematic approach to where you don't have the intention and the care behind the relations part of investor relations.
Right.
And
which is pivotal because it's in the name.
That is pivotal.
Right.
So I had someone on my team who was pretty good at sales. And I think she had gone through and had a lot of sales training, but her personality and her superpower was caring.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So if you guys, ever work with Viking and you meet Amber Butler, like I don't think I have met anyone that cares more than Amber.
No.
Like when an investor calls and is upset, whether we did something wrong or maybe they misunderstood something, like she cares so much that the other person like feels the hug they're getting on the other end of the phone.
Yeah, that's true.
And whether we're in the wrong or no one was in the wrong or they might be unjustly upset, they come away from that conversation feeling heard. And like that's the biggest thing. Like I can't tell you, even as the leader in Viking, that we're never going to make a mistake or we're not going to cause investors to be unhappy with us. It's a difficult business and some things aren't going to go the way that we planned. But I can't tell you the difference it makes for your investors to feel like you're being authentic, transparent, honest, and that you're actually hearing them and you're not ignoring them.
Yeah.
And that's why we created her position as investor concierge, to make sure that we were always accessible. And, she's growing and she's soon going to be, the manager of investor services. And I mean, her future is very bright. I'm really proud of her.
Yeah.
But then opposite her, Amir, and our associate Hayden, like they are, their role is to be sales professionals and at the same time grow people's education on how these things work.
Right. Well, and so I think what you touched on here in the last few minutes is we're talking about how the importance of marketing and sales really being split between two different departments. Most people, when you start out, it is a little bit difficult, right? You're like, man, I have to take on two separate people, or I have to take on a person and have another, maybe go an outside consultant that comes in to help. But you will see that tenfold come back if you recognize that from the beginning and understand that marketing and IR are two separate things. And the reason for that is because marketing, like what we do on our side of things, is we make things shiny, we make things pretty, we use language that you want to know right away. So when you answer a phone call, you're not like, do you want to hear about the IRR and the AAR on this investment you're making? And it's 240 units and da-da-da-da. Like, that is not what you guys are saying. For us, we're putting a big, beautiful picture, and we are saying those things. We're saying, this is how much you'll make on your return. Here's your equity multiple. Here's your IRR. And this is how many units. This is the location. And we're supposed to be saying to you, take a look here. Does this make you want to invest? Is this something in your buy box? Yay. We've done our job. That's not your job. Once we've done that piece, then your job really starts. And I think that's like the huge defining factor that a lot of people didn't understand, is that if your mindset as an investor relations team was like, let's be shiny and let's like get their attention, then you're really doing a disservice to what your role truly is, which what you're saying is education, knowing the ins and outs of the deals, talking about the risks, making sure that every single person has a full understanding of what it is that the investment looks like, so that you can then say, okay, you understand all of these factors at this point. Now let's talk about what size investment would you like to make, because you said yes to this. And Amber's job starts with, I'll get you the materials. I'll be a contact and a resource for you. And then after the fact, she calls to check up on them. How's your portfolio? Do you need anything from us? Do you have questions? Have you checked out our podcast? Like, let's like talk about all those different pieces. And she's a continued resource for people ongoing. And I think that stuff is like so valuable. But one of the coolest things I think that leads me kind of into our next point is how automation, specifically Amber uses, but automations, technology, all of the things that we have, these resources that we have that have actually helped you guys scale with still a team of only 4, to be able to take on 1,000 investors and all of you have the ability to have contact with them. So I'd like you to get into a little bit more, but one of the things that I'd like you really to address is some of the things that she uses to help you guys through the scaling process, as well as let's talk about the new modules that we've created that will also be a resource.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think when I think about investing, the first thing that comes to mind is like the phrase, time is money.
Yes.
Right. So everyone knows this. There's metrics like IRR that measure time value of money. This is all important. But in my mind, the amount of time that my team has to spend on something that we do over and over and over and over again is causing us to be less efficient. And because it's causing us to be less efficient, we're less effective. And if we're less effective, then we're literally losing the company money. And the biggest, I won't call it a time suck, but that's really what it is, was answering the same question over and over and over and over and over.
Right.
And we did it for over a year. We were just answering the same question over and over and over and over and over again. Am I an accredited investor? What is multifamily syndication or real estate? Or what's a syndicate? Or what's a crowdfunding? You know, all these questions were things where like, I was like, how do we educate people on this information without having to pick up the phone and answer these questions? And it wasn't until we got the marketing director that she was like, oh, that's my job. You tell me the questions, I will ask you for the answers, and then I will find ways to sprinkle that over all of the things we use to nurture our investors. And I was a little skeptical at first. I was like, well, are they going to read it? I bet you they still just ask the questions. But lo and behold, the people that invest with us wanted to learn about what they were investing in to better protect their capital. And it's been game changing. So now one of our best practices is anytime we get asked any question, we put it on an Excel sheet and then we send it over to marketing. And we say, hey, we need a blog written on this. Maybe we need to do a social on this. Maybe we need to do, Amber's, really great idea that she worked with you guys on was creating the investor toolkit, which was taking all of those things we put together, categorizing them in one webpage that really was A to Z. Any question you could ask about this, here it is.
Right. And most recently, Amber is the face of it. And, as the investor concierge and the person who walks countless people through the process of investment, she did a step-by-step process from the moment that you say yes, all the way through how to actually go through your paperwork, make your investment happen, like where you put every piece of information, all through online investor modules.
Yeah.
And that's a huge, huge thing for people. And then you have to also talk about, I would say, when she makes thousands of calls a day, right? Because that's part of how you catch the leads. Like we have people who, marketing, we're doing our job. Here's our leads. But in order for those leads to not just die, they need someone to reach out to them. So that's Amber, right? So maybe talk a little bit about what technology we use and like how she's able to accomplish that.
Well, I think first what I want to mention is I think everyone understands the importance of top-down leadership. So executive team to director level, managers down to, whoever the beginning employee is. But one thing that I've harnessed and I've always believed in is bottom-up leadership. And that is where this investor toolkit came from. From our intern talking to Amber talking up and saying, there's a better way we can do this. Like I'm having to go through X amount of brain damage and I think I have a solution. And like, it doesn't have to be my idea for the entire team to get credit for it. But I think listening to the people that are on the front lines and listening to the people that are trying to iterate, when you find someone that can iterate what they're doing and become more efficient, like you want to like add gasoline to that fire. And that's how the investor modules were born, which I wanted to mention. I'm sorry, but could you repeat the last question? I've already.
Yes, I was saying, let's talk about how she makes so many phone calls, the technology,
automations. Yeah, I mean, we have a really diverse tech stack. One thing that we found about a year and a half ago was a software called Phone Burner. And Phone Burner allows somebody to essentially plug in a list and maybe do 400 or 500 calls in an hour. Not everyone's going to pick up. Right. So it'll basically it's kind of like a dialer, but you can set up automations to where if the person doesn't pick up, they might get a text or they might get a email or they might get a follow-up several days later, voicemail, something like that. And that's allowed us to kind of, especially like say we're having a webinar and somebody registered for it 15 days ago. They might not remember it, might not see it in their calendar. We usually will do a courtesy call just before the webinar, and she'll use something like Phone Burner to go through a list of 2,000 people that registered for the webinar. And the ones that she talks to, it's how can I add value? We're going to be answering questions. Do you have any questions you'd like to put in the queue? And the people that don't answer get an email reminding them that there was a webinar.
Yeah. And then we always do the replay that gets sent out, so they're on that list as well.
Correct.
So, and I think that's also a really important piece to talk about is, how many touches that we do on people, because I would say a lot of times one of the mistakes that people make is they reach out once and they're like, well, they weren't interested.
Yeah.
Or maybe they reach out twice and they say, okay. But for us, I mean, think about how many times as a human being you're busy throughout your day. And if a phone number that calls you don't know, you're like, I'm not going to answer that right now. I'm busy. I'm doing things. I'll listen to the voicemail later and then I'll get back to that person. And then you realize, oh man, I was really interested in that thing, but it's not top of mind right now. Now my daughter needs to go to sleep, or I need to cook someone dinner, or I'm going to dinner. And it becomes less on your priorities. And then you forget about it, just like you forget about something in your house, that you were planning to do and it was important to you. And so then the next day they get an email that was, sorry, we missed you. And if you are still interested, here's a phone number to reach us. Here's some information about us as a whole. We'd love to connect, and it's touch point after touch point. And usually a minimum of 3 is what people should use as their base point, because 3 touches, 3 of anything is three reminders, but that's just like how the human brain works. And so I think it's really important that we use that strategy. And a lot of people, I think, probably just give up on it easily.
Yeah, follow-up is key.
Yeah.
And to that same point, also asking the right questions when you get somebody's attention are key too. Because if you just ask them, do you think that you're going to be making a decision on this in the next 90 days? Is this something that you want to maybe explore this over the next 6 months or a year? Like, get that data, put it in your CRM. Because the last thing you want to do is pepper your entire investor base with questions when they've already told you it's probably going to be 6 months. I don't have any liquidity right now.
Right.
I love what you guys are doing. Definitely want the education, but you don't want to be too salesy. But what you want to make sure that you do is when somebody calls you and says, I'm interested in making an investment, please send me the information. You send them the information. Like, don't wait for them to send you an email and say you're waiting. They're ready to move forward.
Right.
Like, there should be multiple touch points, even if it's just to add value.
Absolutely. Sending them another resource.
This is new information that came out about the project. No rush. Totally up to you if you want to move forward. If you have questions, let me know. If any new information comes up, I'm going to go ahead and send it your way. If you feel like, we're sending you too much information or you're not interested, just let you know. And we'll, change our list to account for the fact that you don't really want us to reach out right now. We'll touch base with you in a few months.
Well, and another piece of technology that you just brought up that I think is really important is people do not use Excel sheets, do not use Google Docs as your platform for maintaining information for these people. Get a true CRM system. It is so important, because as you grow and scale, you'll be able to tag people, which is very important. You'll be able to understand their location. You'll know how much their investment was in, which investments they were in. You'll have a lot more at your fingertips rather than having to go back through pages and pages and pages. Automations that are in the CRM systems that help make things easier. A lot of CRM systems work with marketing companies on the platforms that they utilize. So invest in technology now before you get too big, and then it's a hassle having to go backwards. That would be probably one of the biggest takeaways, I would say, when we talk about the strategies of marketing and IR as well.
Yeah, and it seems daunting because when people think CRM, they think Salesforce or they think HubSpot. And we went down those roads, and even at the size Viking is, we decided that those systems weren't for us. We weren't big enough to have an IT department and to have like an executive on the team where technology was their focus. And in my opinion, working with one of those companies, you almost needed that unless you were okay with the out-of-box nature of like one of their professional solutions. We needed more customability, but didn't have the need to have like a VP of IT or an IT stationary person.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we use today Go High Level, and
Mhm.
Go High Level is a marketing CRM, very inexpensive, majorly customizable. And since it's built for marketing professionals, if you have a marketing team, it's the perfect thing to use.
Yeah, because it houses both.
Because it houses both.
Mhm.
So you're able to manage all of the marketing things that you guys do that I don't really know about. Plus, I can have all of my investor pipelines for any of the things that we're either raising capital for, or even if we're doing a campaign that's based off of service, like letting investors know that a property is not doing as well as it is. And we want to make sure we touch every single investor and we don't want anyone to fall through the cracks. We would build a pipeline of those 150 investors, and then we would go through until we reached all of them and pushed them to closed one, which would have been, we've notified them, they understand, and this is how they feel about it. Then it houses all of your notes, and the next time you talk to someone, you pull them up and you can see every conversation you've had with them over the last few years, and it's just completely invaluable for, the cost is, I think, a couple $100 a month.
Right.
Max.
And, that actually brings me to another question. So one of the things I think that Viking does really well, so my background has always been high-end Michelin star hospitality. And what that means is that when I was doing that, the importance of it was that we tracked people basically using a CRM system of their likes, their dislikes, the people they were with, their holidays, their birthdays, what was going on, because we wanted to make every experience specialized to that person. And a CRM system allows you all to do the same thing. And what I was going to ask was, how do you think you guys set your department, investor relations, apart by nurturing and or maintaining long-term relationships with your investors?
Yeah, I mean, that's literally the biggest part. That is the job. So we were just at NMHC and we were talking with a really, well-known institutional group that someone that we trust and respect. And we're working towards working with them on a few of our projects. And not a huge surprise, but we were talking with them and we're like, okay, what kind of properties? What's your buy box? What are you looking for? And we list out all of this information that is the pertinent information in order to find a deal. And then the quote that he gave us, which was incredibly powerful, he's like, look, there's 3 things that need to happen in order for me to work with you. And I'm going to list them in which one's most important. The number 1 thing was whether he liked us or not. The number 2 thing was whether he believed that we were capable. And the number 3 thing was the modeling and whether the deal made. And I think that, really tells the story that real estate and almost every business is a relationship business. And you would think that the capable one might come before being likable, that if you had a good model, you had a good project, or, you were really capable, you had a great track record, that they might lean towards like, okay, maybe I don't like this guy so much. But in his mind, the most important one was being likable. And the way that they look at this is these deals are 3, 5, 7, 10-year deals.
Right, long relationships.
And he's like, if I don't like you when things are going right, what's going to happen when things are going wrong?
Yeah.
And I would implore every investor relations associate to treat every single investor the way that this institutional investor is asking to be treated. People want to work with people that they like. They also want to know that they're capable. And at the end of the day, whether they get a 27% IRR or whether they get a 15% IRR, they want to find those same opportunities with people that they like, people that they trust.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that really, one of the things that we do to gain trust is you meet people in person.
Right.
You go and anyone can talk to someone on the phone. They can type on the computer and type an email out. But when you go face to face with an investor and you answer their hard questions, because we don't just go for new deals, right? We go and we speak most of the time when we travel to existing investors and existing deals that are in the middle of their life cycle. Yep. So there have been highs, there's been lows, they're all over the map. And depending on which ones they're in, because most of them, have invested multiple times. And picking up the phone for an investor when you know that they might be in a deal that's in its low, as important as when you pick one up when they're in their high or when someone's needing education. And I think those qualities are really, really important. And as for any person who's like looking for somebody, you need to know that they have strong skin and is truly willing to have those tough conversations. And I think the thing that we keep coming back to is authenticity. We keep coming back to being capable. And ultimately, I think that we really are encouraging people to find people who fill their gaps, like we talked about. And the way that I kind of want to wrap things up for this episode would be, we're talking about the ideal candidate, talking about growing a team. We're talking about, the strengths and weaknesses and how the all-encompassing of doing so. And we were also talking about, Viking and the progression of how it's come. But I would think full circle, the most important thing that listeners can have as a takeaway would be this last question that I have for you, which would be, if today you didn't have your team and you were starting from scratch, what would be maybe the first 3 steps you would take to building the team beneath you?
Me personally, with the skill set that I have.
Yeah, you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so I am of the school of thought that I would rather a group of young minds, they're smart, that listen to directions, that I can train and teach how to do things the way that I'd like them to be done. That'd be my preference if I were starting from scratch. That being said, I have the ability to mentor people and get them, if someone will just listen to me and follow directions, ask questions and is eager to learn, I can work with that. Not every leader is going to be able to do that. So,
but what would be the 3 steps you would take? So that's like what you would do is you would find, I guess your first step would be to find young talent that's moldable and that's willing to take on leadership. But what else would you do?
to set up my investor relations department.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, I would create a sales training program.
Okay.
It would be mentorship based. So you can only teach somebody so much by telling them what to do. Really what they need is reps. So I would want to see what they're doing. I'd want to record the calls that they're on. I'd want them to listen to me making the calls. So a lot of times what I'm doing with my team is opening up a Zoom room and having everyone join into the Zoom room and then taking like a slate of calls and then seeing how I recover an investor facing adversity, seeing how I take somebody that's interested in, being an institutional partner. And then as they grow, giving them an opportunity to do that where I'm listening in. Which I'm sure you did a lot of this when you were training in the restaurant world, in the hospitality world.
Yeah, absolutely.
But really just letting the team know that if they make a mistake, it's not going to end the world. That like investors will understand. Everyone has to start somewhere, and it's just a guided approach to making sure that they're prepared to take those calls when you're not there.
So number 1, finding moldable young minds.
Multiple young minds.
Teaching through listening and like action. They actually have to see you in like the actual moment of living it and talking to investors and being on the calls with you. And then 3 is you flip the script and you let them take the lead, and then you let them know it's okay to fail if they have to. But ultimately, the goal would be then you get to listen in on their calls and then use that to help teach them. And I feel like that's like a good way. A lot of times, when you teach somebody something, it helps you to get better at your craft. And then obviously building that muscle memory. So the more times that they do it, failing and then getting back up in that recovery. Our youngest, I guess he's now the associate, he was our intern, Hayden. He went from literally being terrified to take calls to now like he's like, give me those calls, baby. And it all through was like your training process with him and the coaching and mentoring that you're talking about.
Yeah, and I mean it's just getting comfortable, no matter what you're doing. And I'd say, the last thing that I'd say that I found a lot of success with is a lot of times I'm talking to the same investors they're talking to, but there's obviously a different, deeper relationship. I've talked to these people for a long time. Now they recognize that as I grow in the company, I'm a little bit less accessible. But when I know that they're interfacing with lots of different people on my team, I'll call them and say, hey, how is so-and-so doing? What do you think?
The feedback.
Have you seen growth? Like, this is what we've been working on. What do you think about how are they doing? You know? And a lot of times they'll give you that feedback, and it even strengthens your bond because now they feel like they're part of the process of the person's growth too.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I think is great because they're pretty candid. They're honest and candid with you about the performance. And I think that's really a great way to have an unbiased opinion on things. So that's really wonderful. That's a great little tidbit for people to take into consideration as well when they're looking and mentoring.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we want to say thank you to our listeners. We know that this was probably an extensive episode, but I feel like there was a ton of value here. And it's probably one of my favorites because we're really digging into what it is you do on a daily basis and what you're really great at. So thank you for all of your insights and your expertise today. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning into this episode. We truly appreciate your support. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share the podcast with your friends. Until next time.